This is the ERP Advisor.
Today's episode, what to do when your legacy software reaches end of life.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, What to Do When Your Software Reaches End of Life. One of our speakers for today is Shawn Windle. Shawn is the founder and managing principal of ERP Advisors Group based in Denver, Colorado. Shawn has over 30 years of experience in the enterprise, has almost 30 years of experience in the enterprise software industry, helping hundreds of clients across many industries with selecting and implementing a wide variety of enterprise solutions. His podcast, The ERP Advisor, has dozens of episodes with tens of thousands of downloads now and is featured on prominent podcast platforms such as Apple and Spotify. Our other speaker today comes to us with over 20 years of experience in the IT space. He has led teams as a director of IT and a director of technical support. And today he provides leadership and guidance to our consulting team. Consulting extraordinaire and industry expert Quentin DeWitt is on the call for us today. And on today's call, Shawn and Q will guide companies through the process of combating their software's solutions end of life. And they will help you consider your options in order to make the right decision. Welcome, and thank you all for joining me today.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us as always, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Wonderful. So we are going to dive in today, but just to provide a little bit of background for anyone on this call, we've discussed this in previous events, but legacy software refers to any solution a company has been running on for 10 plus years. And just for some context, because I know legacy software isn't always the well-known term across the market, but to get us started, Shawn, what does it mean for legacy software to reach end of life?
It's really a good question, and one that I've been contemplating a lot recently, especially since we were doing this webinar. The bottom line comes down to, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. Let me give you a little bit of background, and then I'll give you the answer. I think that's what this is. So there's a reality that businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, whether for-profit companies, private companies, a lot has changed in the last, we'll say 10 years with the way that business operates. And I'll just use business or organizations generally, meaning nonprofits and everything else from this point forward in this call. A lot has changed, and there's a lot more diversity that all of our clients are being asked to do by their shareholders, by their customers, by their members, by their constituents, where they're having to diversify their businesses. And I mean, I'm talking every client we've worked with. And what has happened is as businesses have evolved, some software solutions haven't, where they're built around a paradigm of this is how engineering firms work. They sort of set a peg in the timeline that says, okay, this is how it works. And there you go. Now, over time, this is just an example. Engineering companies are doing more purchasing. They're doing more design work. They're doing more services like field services work. They might even be selling products as part of what they do. Quentin can talk about that till he's blue in the face. So organizations and companies have changed so much, but the software didn't. Now, some of the solutions have changed and some have evolved, right? We're going to probably talk a lot about Microsoft on this call. You look at the newer Microsoft solutions like Business Central or Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Those operations, that was my own little personal little thing I just added. I didn't push like a little button for a sound effect. Those applications have really evolved, right? They're kind of at the next level. Now, Microsoft knew that GP or Great Plains, Navision, Exapta, Solomon, SL, NEV, AX, GP, all kinds of names. They purposely made a decision, which was we're not going to evolve those products going forward. So when I tend to think about, legacy software, I mean software that was built in a paradigm that doesn't match the modern day way of running businesses. Now, that being said, if you are a straightforward engineering firm, as I said, Dell Tech almost has dominated that market for a long time. Their solutions, they've done a new cloud-based solution called Vantage Point, And by the way, Deltek people listening to this, if I get something wrong, let us know. I think we talked to you though when we did our blogs and already put this information out for the public, but correct me if I'm wrong, although I don't think I am. But we just had somebody from Sage correct us on something which was helpful. That's why I say that. But Deltek Vantage Point is sort of reskinned to be a browser-based solution. But the fundamental ways that it operates is kind of based on how systems or how engineering firms kind of worked 10 plus years ago. So let me just boil it down to something very, very simple. Legacy software is basically software that kind of doesn't really match how we do business today. That's the easiest definition. And of course, we're going to get into end of life and end of support and on life support and, you know, in hospice ready, basically, because it's near the end of its life and it's going to, you know, we're going to talk a lot about those different stages as we go. And Rebecca, I think we should have a graph that shows the maturation of software and just shows like how it starts, nobody knows about it, then it hits critical mass, and then it becomes very common. And then they do unfortunately start to go down, right? So we're talking about the applications that are on their downward trajectory towards death. I don't want to get all gloom and doom and everything, but that's when we're talking about legacy software, we're talking about apps that really just don't match the way we do business today. What do you guys think of that definition, Rebecca? What would you say on that?
No, I think that's definitely the case. And you and I have had this going back and forth because sometimes legacy software isn't always the right term, or like it's not necessarily that it's not being supported anymore. It's not necessarily that it's coming to end of life. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't fit your needs anymore and it's an old system and it's catered to the way that things used to be done and not catered to the way things are being done now. And so that can definitely change how people view the software and how people need to move forward, or if their system is on life support, sitting in the hospital, waiting for people to come say bye to it.
Yeah. And I'd say there's also that aspect you said, they're old. Sometimes it's just about the architecture, the way the software was developed, that it's a little bit older. It's an older style, not necessarily taking advantage of all the newer technologies out there. So that's another thing that sometimes categorizes legacy software.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important for the rest of the conversation for us to talk about a point that Shawn already mentioned. So Q, can you explain to our viewers the difference between end of support and end of life?
Sure, yeah, there is a nuanced difference there. Some people think of that as the same thing, but really end of support basically means that the company backing it, the software vendor, is not going to provide anything other than critical fixes. They may continue hosting it for you. It's still live. They'll sell you licenses and things like that for it, but they're not really going to make updates for it. They're not going to support you and do the technical support they did in the past. It's more like it's heading towards that end of life, but it's a stage, it's a stepping stone towards end of life for that particular platform or version of that platform. Whereas end of life is truly like, it's done. We're not going to host it. We're not going to sell you licenses. We aren't going to build anything new for it. We're totally done with this. And, you know, end of support, it's risky. It's definitely risky because you're not going to get any new things coming out. And only if it really fails are you going to be in a position where you can get the help you need. You may have to go to outside resources. And even if you have your own resources, it can be a challenge to support an end of support platform. End of life, however, that's like, you know, you're not going to get any help except for what you can scrounge up yourself or your own resources. Occasionally, there's some outside organizations that can help you somewhat, but their hands are tied. They don't have the code of the software to help resolve the really big issues. So you're in the most risky state if you go to that end of life with a product and you're still on it. So.
Yep. It's, you know, it's interesting with that too. We just talked to a company recently that was on an older version of I'm going to start throwing out some names. My whole political correctness is gone. I have no filter. Erica, after this call, is going to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. And as usual, to the vendors out there, call us, tell us we're wrong. Here we go.
Or I'll start muting Shawn.
Yeah, Rebecca also can cut me off. She can control the Zoom and be like, stop saying that. No,
Yeah.
it'll be fine. It'll be good. So we had a prospect recently running Oracle eBusiness Suite. God, what version was? I don't even remember what version it was. but it was not supported by Oracle anymore. Now, Oracle, well, not Oracle, but there were some partners in the industry that provided sort of support in some shape, form, or fashion from some of these non-supported Oracle solutions. And there's been many, many lawsuits over the years related to that. And I think Oracle just won one, a pretty major one. And so it's just it's kind of like you got an old car, and first off, you got an old car. Kind of tells you something. Why don't you go get a new car? Oh, they're too expensive. No, they're not. They're not. There's financing. There's things you can do to make it like you can get some money, right? Like you can figure this out. But eventually that car is going to die. And if the manufacturer is not supporting, or nobody is servicing this, or you got to go to some guy on some strange part of town who still works on it, or some gal, like my friend had a Yugo. You don't even know what a Yugo is, do you, Rebecca?
Nope.
Good. Again, I am aged by my team. And if John, my best friend in high school still had that Yugo, he'd be hosed, because nobody supports a Yugo anymore. You'll have to Google it later. Like it's dead. They're done. They're finished. And maybe there's places in the world that do, I don't know. And maybe there's repair shops that are listening to this. Let me know. My son's in the repair industry. I should talk to him too. He works on Hondas. Anyway, long story short, nobody's going to support these things. And so you're like dead in the water. And it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. No, you're running your business on this app and it's not supported at all. You can't go anywhere for help. And then maybe you got a couple developers around who chances are they could be a little bit later in their career, and they want to do things like retire. We talk about this all the time. So there's a real risk with that it's very easy to not think about that risk and to think about other risks in the business. But Q, you've gone into so many different clients, and you get to be the bearer of bad news on some of this. It's literally like, I am sorry to tell you that your system is close to the end here. We're going to say some prayers. We're going to burn some candles, hope things work out. But we can't just rely on the higher power here. You might have to get more at cause.
Absolutely, yeah. And funnily enough, although we're talking about end of support and end of life, with legacy software, sometimes they haven't even announced that, but the product is still in a state where it's having those sorts of trouble. It's an old car, it's about to fail, it's not supporting the business, and they haven't announced end of life or end of support yet, but they should. So legacy software kind of has those quirks.
Yeah. And Q, you and I were talking about this earlier. You were saying that there are sometimes some indicators that something might be coming up on end of support or end of life. Like you've seen some deadlines, things like that.
Yeah, you start to see software vendors, they've been pumping out updates, they've been pumping out new versions, they've been taking advantage of tying in new products that they developed with the base platform, and you'll start to see them stop doing that. They say, oh, we've developed this new product, you should start looking at this, and they promote that, although they have not announced an end of support or an end of life. Then you get to the point where on that particular version, they do give you your end of support notification. That is a red flag to say, I better start looking at my upgrade path or a new platform immediately, because usually I'd say when you get that end of support notification, you're about 2 to 4 years to end of life. 2 years is more typical, 4 years for larger platforms where they have a lot more clients on them, but 2 years is usually a good indicator. And I think, there's some platforms that even recently announced something like that. Rebecca, you may have more on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I know Microsoft Great Plains. Shawn mentioned that we were going to mention that. That one has a lot of people reeling right now over some announcements. There were lots of years where they were releasing new versions, and they were still, every time they'd release a new version, the end of support, end of life deadline got pushed back. Well, they officially kind of made the announcement that, hey, this is where we're at. In the latest version of GP is going to stop receiving what some may call like mainstream support, what they call mainstream support as of 2029. And then they can expect that there will be no more security fixes as of 2031. And typically, if you're no longer receiving security fixes, that means the product is going to be end of life. So lots of companies are in a position right now with Great Plains where they're considering their options forward. And I think that this whole migration is going to be a great case study for people, because BC is Business Central. That is the next path. That's really what Microsoft is advertising is the next path forward for these clients. And while it is a great product and there are many companies that it suits, like there are going to be some companies, like Shawn said, that that's not right for them. They have new needs. They've expanded. They are going into adjacent services that now BC is not going to meet. And that's not to say it doesn't fit still. Like there's still lots of industries that's going to be the right path for them. But it does muddy the waters when a vendor makes an announcement like that and people start to panic for sure.
Well, I think this is a great reason why, Rebecca, if I was looking at a change in my ERP, which I'm not for my company, we're on a great product. I think I've told this story before on these calls. We had a salesperson call in that sells something similar to what we use for our professional service automation. And I thought he was going to give us a lead actually for somebody. And then he says, okay, but I would like to talk to you about changing your product. And it's terrible. I dropped an F-bomb and I was like, no, like, no. You ain't touching my side. I'm not going through that. Are you crazy? Yeah. We made a big decision early in our evolution to be on a product that can scale with us. Really, we can go 10x with this product, but we pay a premium for that. But by gosh, we help all these companies do it. We better do that. Now, if you're on a product, like you said, please listen to Rebecca's podcast on the ERP news. You're tracking all kinds of updates and things that are coming out and releases, and also you're in communication with the Sages and with Infor and Epicor and all these companies to find out what's the newest, not just what releases or acquisitions, but also what is changing with their end of life and those kinds of things. So it's important that if you're in this, like, please subscribe to that, because she's going to say something on some call and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you just said that. It's important to be informed.
Yeah. And I do really try to cover the most important things. And Shawn knows this. And the reason I know all these things about the legacy path forward for a lot of these products is because I'm writing the articles. So I'm doing the heavy lifting so that you don't have to. And believe me, some of these, it's a little harder to find the information. So you never know when some tiny little announcement's going to be made and you're left in the dark just because you haven't been digging around on the online, which none of us really have time to do that unless it's your job. So
well, I definitely use what you put together, Rebecca. That keeps me up to date. And so I really appreciate that.
Of course. And I think one last thing before we move forward that I kind of want to clarify, and I hinted at it a second ago, was each of the vendors has a different way of describing support. So anyone listening to this call may have gotten announcements where their vendor saying it's end of extended support, or it's end of whatever mainstream maintenance, or their sustaining support. And they all mean the same thing at their heart. Most of the time, mainstream support or general support, things like that, when you hear from the vendors, that's what we're talking about. It's a product that's their go forward. They're doing what they need to be doing. They're innovating. The second a product goes into something like extended support, you're paying extra for the vendor to help you and to give you upgrades or to provide hot fixes when you need them. That can be another indicator, if you're paying extra for support, that the product is going in a direction of end of life or end of support. And then the second you hear anything like sustaining maintenance from any of the vendors, that means they're just keeping the lights on. So you would want to start considering your options. That's not to say that the product's going to end tomorrow, but it's going back to those indicators that Q said where, okay, maybe I should start thinking about this. And
Rebecca,
I think,
I'm sorry, finish up. And then there's a very important point I have to add. Go ahead.
The next segue was going to be into the question for Q, so you go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I want you guys to understand the why behind all of this. When you understand the why, everything just makes sense. There's another sound effect, Rebecca. I'm getting better at them. Anyway.
We'll start making them.
We should, shouldn't we? I don't know if the gestures are working on Zoom here. Anyway, got to spice it up. Here's the thing for all of the listeners out there that are on the call literally right now, and for people that are listening to this on the treadmill later, they're hopefully not swimming with their headphones in, they're going to die. Don't do that. You're on a plane, wherever you are, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm worried about legacy software. Please listen up. You have to understand the economics of software vendors to really understand why they do what they do. And I'm going to do this super fast. The economics of on-prem software versus SaaS software are totally different. They used to sell the software once and do maintenance every year. Now they basically sell you the software every year. Now, hopefully your contracts, especially if you work with us, are going to give you a price protection for a long time. But every year, the vendor now is charging you, not just for the software, but also the hardware that runs it and all the infrastructure software, blah, blah, blah. We have other calls that talk about cloud versus on-prem. So now the economic model has shifted. And the valuation for software companies has changed, and the public markets, all of the pension funds and all the institutional investors that invest in software companies want a bigger return. And they're getting that with the software as a service, so subscription-based software. So the vendors are saying, we're getting rid of all the on-premise software because we want you in the cloud. And yes, the valuations are better for them, but it's more than that. It's that now the vendors have more volition over the application and ability to change that app really sometimes every week. You might not even know it, but you're getting hot fixes to your instance in the cloud every week. If you look at your contracts, everybody out there, because believe me, I have, and Quentin has too, everybody from Salesforce to Workday to all the Oracle, everything, we've looked at all of it. There are usually maintenance windows every week where the vendor says, look, I'm going to take your software down for a couple hours and I'm going to bring it back up. You know why? Because they're maybe doing some testing and fixing, but they're putting hot fixes in. They're putting in, some customer found an issue, and so they're changing the code so that you don't have that problem. And that's a godsend, if you ask me. That means you're benefiting from thousands and thousands of other customers who run into a situation before you do. So that's the second reason here of these end of life, end of support things, is to get you in the cloud. And you will get better functionality. I guess that's the third piece of this. Not only is your infrastructure better supported, but you're going to get more functionality because the vendors couldn't get you functionality without you doing an upgrade to your instance. And then, oh my gosh, it blows up because I customized blah, blah, blah. We know about that. We have tons of stuff on configuration versus customization. But when you're in the cloud-based instance, when you do a customization, you're basically already in the app. And even during your implementation, you're going to do an upgrade and it'll flesh out if your system's going to die because you put in customization. So just really fundamentally understand. You can fight it as long as you want. Sometimes Erica and I, we complain about this and that, and we're kind of like, fine, that's the way it is, right? As a married couple, you kind of need to be that way here on your legacy software. Like, you got to get out of this stuff. And there are benefits that you may never know because thousands and thousands of other customers are testing the application. They're making sure the functionality is there. They're also ensuring that the infrastructure is there so that you don't get hit with cybersecurity risks on your enterprise apps and that stuff. That's just a quick background on why.
Yeah. And I think, Shawn, just to add to that, we have a ton of resources about like the benefits of moving on to the cloud and maybe some of the risks that you're putting yourself in being on-prem. There are situations where that's the best decision, but we have resources as well as like our own internal documents for any customers who are looking at Great Plains to Business Central, like I mentioned, anything like that. So I know all of you have my email because you received the call details. So if you have questions about that, specific ones, please reach out to me. I can connect you with the right people, or you can email Erica at erpiadvisorsgroup.com. And she's a great resource and would love to help you with your project. That being said, I would like to roll into the next question, which Q, why does a solution's end of life deadline or announcement really matter?
It starts the timer, it starts the clock. It says, hey, you're going to be all done in a certain period of time, and they're not going to support you at all, especially that end of life. Now, this also says that, you have to take a look at it. Is there a new version? Is there an upgrade path? Is this going to leave you with a risk like cybersecurity or access or a vulnerability that your organization can't afford to do? But it's really that notification saying you have this window of time to upgrade or change. And so it matters quite a bit. And it really is basically giving you that notification. Something's going to change whether you like it or not, and you have to change with it. And so that's really why that matters. From a day-to-day position, it doesn't matter. Your software is going to continue to run, you're going to continue to be able to operate, but it makes you look ahead. And that's the most important thing that announcement can do. Start looking ahead and making goals, making decisions, planning for the future. So, that is the simple part of it.
Yeah. And I think
what
for
to do is
most,
harder.
yes. I think for most people that are in that situation where they're hearing like all of a sudden my products and they coming to end of life, very rarely, and Shawn, you might have a different perspective than I do. Very rarely do I see people who are like, oh, we're on the most up-to-date version, so we have tons of time. Most of the time it's like, oh, I'm on like 8.0 and that ended support 3 years ago. So I've just been chugging along. Okay, well, now your upgrade path isn't as simple. Like you could have upgraded to version 10 and then you could have gone to the cloud, but now you're going to have to probably start all over. And so many factors can change that. But Shawn, in your experience, is that what you see? Or are most people on the most up-to-date version of these legacy systems?
No, you are spot on. They're not on the most up-to-date version, but there's like different categories of folks out there with their legacy solutions, right? So you're on the most recent version of, well, Sage 300 CRE, right? We had this conversation with Sage, which was awesome. And we love it when the vendors call us back and they're like, pull down your article that says end of life on Sage 300 CRE. And we're like, okay, tell us more. And then they told us more and we're like, oh, okay, yeah. Even though we had the right content, the title was misleading. So we changed it, right? Would you change it to, Rebecca?
Just understanding Sage 300 CRE's support.
Yep.
Support.
So the most recent versions of Sage CRE are still 300 CRE are still being enhanced. They're still putting money into the product and it's still moving forward, right? Now, Quentin, I think you have a small customer. I'm sorry. That's running Sage 300 CRE for the last, what, 20 years?
Yeah, around 20 years.
20 years. And they're on the version from, I think, maybe 10 years ago.
They are on an older version and they're stuck on that older version.
Stuck on that older version. So yeah, anyway, there's other analogies, but I'm not going to say them. They're stuck with it. They're like, right? So, I mean, it really has been a big deal for this company, very fast growing, making acquisitions. And when we talk to them, we're like, oh, okay, great. We can help you for sure with this. What application are you on? Sage 300 CRE from 10 years ago. We're like, oh, wow. So it does depend on the exact version that you're on. And Rebecca does, I mean, we're not trying to plug ERP advisors completely on these calls. I mean, we kind of are, but I can't say this enough. Rebecca is the best researcher in the ERP industry. Boy, did I just set you up there, girl.
Yeah.
But it's kind of true. It's true. That you have to look at the version that you're on. How do I know? Well, usually if you open the app and there's like a help button and then there's an about and right there is the version that you're running. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is. Just take a look at it. And, you can even Google, what is the support plan for Microsoft Dynamics GP, this version, and you'll find articles. Hopefully you'll find a lot of our stuff too. But that's the secret, is you've got to know exactly what version you're on. But just like you said, Rebecca, a lot of times we have customers who call us and they do say, I'm on this version of DCOM and they're not supporting that anymore, right? So if you haven't done an upgrade in the last, I would say, I mean, easy to say 10 years, but in the last probably 5 years since COVID hit, you're probably on a product that will require, just like Rebecca said, to get to the most recent version, you might have to do a major upgrade, which is almost like a re-implementation. So you got to be careful of that.
And I mean, obviously we're having this call because it's not a small issue. Everybody does it. And honestly, why would you change your ERP if you don't have to? And that's where a lot of people are, is the system's running just fine for them. And then suddenly there's an announcement and their system's no longer going to be supported or get what it needs. And that being said, Shawn, lead the way. What should businesses do when they find out their solution is reaching end of life?
Call Win at 1-800 Rebecca McCabe.
I'm going to get calls now, Shawn.
I know, you should.
For research projects.
That's right. I want to talk to Rebecca. Help me. It's kind of true. But I mean, there's three things here that you have to do, and we've kind of covered them already, but I'm going to make it very succinct for once instead of blah, 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 like I do. The first thing is find out for real, no kidding, what version you're really on. And you can look in the app, you can talk to, if you have a VAR, you can ask them, right? But find out where you're really at. Don't just be like, oh my gosh, I'm on Deltek Vision and I think it's going to go away. No, go look at the version. The second thing is you do have to find an expert that can advise you. And it's not like you have to search the planet, go find some guru who sits in Nepal on some mountain who's waiting for you to say, oh yes, you're running Microsoft Dynamics 365 SL. I've been waiting for you. No, just that you probably have somebody who's supporting you today, and talk to them. And and this is a secret. If you made it this far into the call, you're going to love this secret. What they will say to you is, well, I've been talking to you for the last 4 years about doing the upgrade, because guess what? I don't make money implementing GP now. I make money upgrading you to BC, Business Central, or I make money upgrading companies to Epicor Kinetic instead of doing Epicor 10. The partner that you're already working with put their kids through college, if they're older like I am. Maybe they're younger. I doubt it if you're on a legacy app, frankly, but they're paying for their bills and they're paying their people by doing services. They've had to evolve too. So that's why you can talk to these folks, and they're usually really, really good people. Like I always say, 80% of all people are phenomenal. Talk to them and see what they're saying. We had a prospect recently who said, oh, my partner's they're just being so pushy about me upgrading. And I'm like, you're welcome for your partner. I'm telling you, you're welcome, because your partner actually knows more than you do. And they're kind of like, oh, that's true. So find talk to your partner. Of course, you can always talk to us to get the data. You can always look at the Microsofts, the Macola, ECI pages, the Amtech, right, Quentin, pages. You can go to, the legacy applications. There's a ton. Go to the website. There's always a contact us or a phone number. You can always call the software vendor too. So get the data about what's real. Don't just respond, just like Rebecca said it so perfectly, like, oh my gosh, there was an announcement, SAP ECC 6 isn't going to be supported as of 2030. I'm freaking out. Don't do that. Go get the real data, right? Then the third thing is, that's where you decide what to do. And just know this, when you're coming off of a product that was on-prem, you are basically going to do a re-implementation for the cloud. Now, the database structures are similar from Vision, Deltek Vision to Deltek Vantage Point. And the partners have tools built that help that data migration to go easier, but it's still a re-implementation. And so if you're implementing, you should take the time at that point to say, what else really is in the market? Let me just do a little bit of research there, right? And make sure, because you're about to go through a painful experience, and I don't want you to do an upgrade to a product that was really, you chose the product because of how you operated 10, 15, 20 years ago. There are other products in the market that may make sense to look at. So those are the 3 steps. Find out where you're really at. Get really good information from a trusted advisor who can tell you what your options are, and then evaluate, do you upgrade, right? Or do you migrate to a new system? And again, we have data on all 3 of those steps and how to do that. But that third one in particular, that's the most tricky for sure. And probably of all the places that I should plug us, it's this one, that between Adam and Rebecca and Erica, we have resources that can tell you, and we will be the first to tell you, do not go through this. Go to just do the migration, right? Or like, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the way you wrote the way you customized EBS, or, you built this ECC or R3, SAP R3 instance, it's mammoth. The good news is maybe there's tier 2 solutions that make sense, or you got to go with public cloud or private cloud for S/4HANA or whatever. We can guide you to give you a little bit of basics to get you going in the right direction.
Definitely. And I think just a little bit of more free advice to tack onto that. I think if you're going to try and tackle this on your own and you're not talking to an expert, make sure you're looking at their platform strategy or their what they have a plan for. It's not, nowadays businesses are taking on so much more, and they're acquiring solutions, or they're adding different services so that they can better serve their customers across the entire life cycle of a product. So make sure you're considering that when you're moving to a new ERP. Don't just think, oh, I would say tons of our clients, they think they're manufacturers and they come in and we're like, well, you also do this. Well, we're manufacturers. Yeah, but you're also super complicated. And I don't think you realized how complicated you are. So just keep that in mind and consider what you're going to need, not just now, but 10 years from now.
And Rebecca, I would be remiss if I didn't ask Quentin, who has, I think Quentin's hair used to be black like last week. So I only say that because I'm looking at mine. Q, you've been through like it feels like war and agony and like the Battle of the Bulge and all of these, really tough projects of people that were in legacy systems going to a more modern system. Like, and you've become not just friends with these people, but like you're like their trusted like advisor, a Sherpa. You're the guy that, pulls the load and puts it on your back and gets them through. What would you say to people listening to this to just like, to take all those years of experience that would be helpful to them?
I would say that, one of the big things to understand is that the software vendor truly does want to help you. They want to service you. It's often thought of that they're doing this to you, but actually it's because, the model, it's just not going to be able to support you going forward. So they've stopped investing in it, but they have other options. So don't think that your software vendor is against you, but work with them to find the right path forward. That's part of the expert advice step, is that they are the experts on your platform and can direct you towards a new solution. And they're trying to provide a new solution. So don't burn your bridges is mainly what I'm saying there, because sometimes it feels like, you're done with them and you want out. But they've supported you this far. They've given you good software, and so they can help you to the next stage. And usually you find they're willing to help you. If they don't have the solution, they'll tell you, and they'll help you to say, yeah, here's something that you could do that would be helpful. So that's one thing I would say, is also that when you get this, you have time, but it's limited. So use that time wisely. And when you get into the thick of it, use it as an opportunity versus something where you feel like you're a victim in the process. So look at your organization, look at your needs, look at where you want to be, look forward rather than backwards, and how you can use this announcement, this change, to propel your organization into the future even better. And you'll find that there are many ways you can do that. So those are some of the advices, having been through the bad. And how do you get out of that? You look forward. So.
And the good too. You've been through a lot of circumstances, and I think all of them have turned out at the end of the day to be successes, which is a miracle. That's why we call you St. Quentin of ERP. It's like we need some Lord of the Rings name for you, because I think you're more of a Lord of the Rings guy, right?
Yeah, I'd say more so.
We have to. I finally watched a couple of those the other day. We have to come up with some name for you. The Gandor of ERP. Anyway, it's true. That's great. I'm going to stop talking about that stuff now, because it's back to you, Rebecca.
Wonderful. If you guys have nothing else to add, I just want to thank you so much for being here today. I do think that this call was very, very helpful based on the feedback I'm getting on these polls. So thank you so much for joining us. And anybody on the call, please let us know if you have any questions. Like I said, my email's open, Erica's email's open. Shawn mentioned Adam. He's also a resource, and we are all available at our website, erpadvisorsgroup.com, which many of you would have gone to sign up for this event. So be sure to join us for our next webinar, which is scheduled for Thursday, May 15th. Why should you hire an ERP selection consultant? Little self-serving, but if any of you are considering an ERP project, I mean, we are going to have some great resources on that call, and I'm super excited for one of our other consultants, Ryan, to join us, and he's going to have a very unique perspective. We will outline why you should hire an ERP selection or why you should hire an ERP selection consultant to ensure the success of your next ERP migration. Please go to our website, erpadvisorsgroup.com, for more details and to register. ERP Advisors Group is one of the country's top independent enterprise software advisory firms. ERP Advisors Group advises mid to large-sized businesses on selecting and implementing business applications from enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, human capital management, business intelligence, and other enterprise applications, which equate to millions of dollars in software deals each year across many industries. This has been the ERP Advisor. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having us too, as always.